So, Anne, let's start with you. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you're passionate about, and why not, who's inspired you?
Okay, thank you, Karen, and hello, everyone. Right, so who inspires me? If I go perhaps one step before that, because there are many people that inspire me, and leadership, I would say, is the art of inspiring others to be inspiring. So I look for small acts of inspiration wherever I can find them. And if I were to sum it up, inspiration comes from, for me, people doing things in their own particular way, putting their perspectives and their experience into unique solutions. So somebody like Elon Musk, who decided that actually what he wanted to do was focus on the biggest problems that he could find and figure out ways to solve them. That's a very unique and individualized path. And he's done amazing things as a result of pursuing that path because he had the guts and the determination to try and do it off his own bat. And I really am inspired by that kind of initiative. And then also the creativity that people bring to that sort of thought. So another would be somebody like Maya Angelou, who through great hardship and severe challenges literally found her voice despite them, and who brought the creativity that came with finding that voice to us all. And I think her work is hugely inspiring, and all the better and more touching and moving for it. So that's the sort of thing that I get inspired by, people that move you to do something or who have that innately within themselves as part of their own DNA initiative.
Yeah, great. So, and that's what you do, is actually help people find that inspiration and empower them. You're not in HR though, so explain where you play.
Well, it's always been interesting to me how people react to things. I mean, I started way back in advertising, actually launching Apple early in the mid 80s, where it was a new tool that allowed people to do things differently. I was so struck by that experience that since then, the relationship with how people behave around the tools and the opportunities that they have, I think there's an innate connection there in terms of how we bring ideas to market and how people respond to those ideas.
Yeah, so we met just before I left WPP, and I really think you own that space, or in the intersection of brand purpose, technology, and networks. So I'm looking forward to hearing more, and I'm sure the audience is looking forward to hearing more about all those topics. We said empowering human networks by design. So let's start with human networks. What are human networks?
Well, in the last 10, 15 years, probably it's the time we've only really started to think about human networks. They're the kinds of things that we all have. We all had them before any of us were ever digital, but we don't really get to spend too much time thinking about them or understanding the nature of them. I've done some very interesting work with organizations, asking people to think about the networks that they have, the people that they go to for advice, the people they work with, the people they relax with, the people that they are inspired by, the people that they make plans with. We have huge networks. They're very much more potent now that we're connected, and yet they're largely speaking untapped. The most we talk about when it comes to harnessing social network power is, will it go viral, for example. Whereas I think actually when we go deeper into value sets, what we're seeing perhaps geopolitically in the world is there's some fundamental value-oriented discussions that we are being forced to have because we realize that people hold very different values. How do we associate, given those different value sets? How do we organize? Those are the things which I think the power of human network, social network analysis is bringing to the fore, that we can do things with, both socially for impact and also in terms of how we organize professionally for business and commercial value.
Yeah, and I think internally in organisations, big and small, we sometimes seem to think that networks are how we partner externally, how we build networks outside, but that whole value system and how we build networks internally, again, whether we're 10 people in a startup or whether there's 70,000 people in an organisation, is important. So why does it start, do you think, with defining where we're going and why? Or why does it start with defining the brand purpose or company purpose?
Well, because it's a glue, it's a unifying glue. It's the sort of terms of reference. The social objects are in there, the absolute points of shared understanding, which people can congregate around. So, for example, I've done a lot of work with organizations in number, so 200 or 300 organizations at a time, doing macro analysis with them in various sectors, and it's becoming quite compelling in terms of the evidence that smaller, tighter networks are more effective because it's easier to share that understanding. So you see that in a startup culture where you have a core group of people with a very tight, focused and honed intention. They are able to power and disrupt and do things effectively because of that. You also see it in organizations which are smaller, and are able to adapt and be more responsive. So I think being able to harness that sense of shared purpose is really an engine. It's a way of being able to create some very implicit mutual motivation that can get things done.
Yeah, so that mutual motivation in turn inspires people and helps more people join in. I think that sense of belonging is extremely important. So how can technology then help spread that shared purpose and potentially even make organizations more human?
Well, it's really interesting, this relationship between the human impetus and the technological enablement. And I'm always interested in looking at smart new examples of business modeling. So, for example, if one looks at something like Zoopla Invest, which I love as a business initiative. So this is Zoopla encouraging its users to invest in property funds based on the experience that people have in terms of the quality of the search and the resources that Zoopla gives them as property kind of finders. That's the kind of initiative that you're not necessarily going to get that just from the data. It takes smart human insight to be able to take a situation and to dig into what the potential is beyond just dialing in a job effort. We know a lot of people in organizations are disillusioned or feel under motivated. They're not doing anything much beyond the KPIs and the job description. When we can start to think about technology, data, tools, new capabilities, giving people more insight and ability to accelerate learning and to share that networked intelligence, we're getting into some really quite interesting and dynamic ways of organizing as a result of the technology and how humans are using it.
Yeah, and it's that insight that takes us forward and helps us make better, more long-term decisions. I love the example of Zoopla, and I know that you definitely opened me up to a whole world which is very organic, which actually played to my sort of love of people and why I do the job that I do. But even technology can show that people truly are the heartbeat of the organization. So you can see through technology and listen to conversations and then still sort of connect people using that technology, but hopefully it will remain augmented humans and not just robots. So how can leaders use that the power that listening gives them and that technology gives them to empower their teams?
It's really interesting, isn't it? This choice that we have between, if you like, it's not an either or, but there's a balance to be struck between enhancing and augmenting. And I think it takes a deft hand strategically to know how to do that. And also, particularly this year, it's becoming more and more of a hot topic, because I would say the one thing I've talked about more than anything else this year is machine readable data to clients. I think that 2016 is the year that artificial intelligence came of age. It started to become significant in terms of the corporate agenda. And it's very interesting to me that that is the case, because when we think about that and what artificial intelligence brings to the table today, and then at the same time, we also think about the wealth of networks. The wealth of networks throughout history, before we were digital, has been built on the basis of collaboration, people sharing knowledge, surfacing hidden issues, being able to solve problems. So I think to be able to think about how we really bring that to the table within an organizational system which is becoming more intelligent as a result of data and technology, that's when we start to get into what I'd say is the the second stage of digital transformation and is potentially way more potent than the first one. We've just been laying the foothills, I think, at the moment in terms of where we can take commercial and social impact using technology. And that's why is I think that the wealth of networks is now something we can start to more consciously develop, knowing how the basics work.
Yeah, so we're just at the beginning of this journey, and people and leaders, whatever level they're at, shouldn't fear the experimentation and trying it out, and more importantly, shouldn't use it as an excuse to stay in their office. You know, I really see this as augmentation in its full definition, in that, you know, this will just make us smarter and free up time to be able to connect with more people. It also gives employees a voice. You know, how does the technology help employees stand taller and stand up?
The biggest single advantage that I think can come out of this is when the strategists, the decision makers, think about where they can create safe sandboxes for experimentation. That, in terms of my own personal development and what I've seen working over the last 8 years since I've been doing this, is the single most important reason and the factor as to why things will work well or why they don't. You know, you can call that beta testing, you can call that A/B testing, you can call that service design iteration or agile development. But I think to be able to have sandboxes which are safe and in which people can experiment, whether that's as communities or whether that's as practical projects, is really key. And the reason that I say that is that I think when we're thinking about, particularly for organizations that have not started off their life as digitally native, that are transitioning, but also for young organizations that are thinking about how they mature, when we think about all of that, most people have not been able to really have opportunities before now in terms of talking about the work they do, working out loud, articulating in a shared space. And it's a muscle which I think is still quite underdeveloped. So we're used to doing the work and we're used to talking about other stuff. But actually the ability to create these powerful networked organizations comes from people being able to work out loud, and to focus on that comes from being able to try and fail, or to have safe environments in which people can begin to start to experiment.
Yeah, we've all seen the latest data from Google as well around psychological safety, which is not new, but it's great to hear in your language how human you make it as well. So psychological, experimental areas are really the best way to get people to be at their best. Whether that be in a team context, whether that be in a wider organisation, but getting people speak up is the best possible thing we can do. And you're writing a book today, aren't you, with with Simon, about self-agency, and that seems to be a word that we're talking about more and more. Tell us more about that, Anne.
Well, it definitely, thank you. We are, and the whole idea of self-agency is something which is definitely becoming more current, I think. Building on that point, if the machines are more and more prevalent, if the data can provide the answers, then what happens to the human? Where is the role for the human? And how can we as individuals develop a certain resilience? I think that a lot of the time organizations don't necessarily keep pace with the opportunities for people's dispersed experience, when job descriptions are changing a lot, when we think about the future of the individual as tethered or not to an organization. Self-determination is becoming more important. People are working, shorter contracts as entrepreneurs. So we wanted to start to address that and think, well, how is it people can develop a certain self-reliance as digital humans? And I think that comprises of three elements. One is the technical, so beyond the login and beyond just being able to be present across social networks and working in a digital way, how do people begin to develop their own footprint, ship things which are initiatives that they can point to as their output, So technically that involves skilling up to some extent, whether that's being able to code or to just lead in open space. Then there's the creative element, so we're focusing on that. Being able to think about looking at things from different perspectives, changing the context in which to innovate, being able to share and collaborate and think about deeply what we bring that's uniquely our own. So that creative aspect of human nature, I think, is very much underdeveloped. Most people are not given license or don't believe that they're creative in their own sense. Every entrepreneur needs to find what that is that entrepreneurial driver. So we want to kind of focus and help people identify that in themselves. And then also just thinking about the economics, the business models are changing so much, how people develop incomes and also how businesses develop sustainable commercial bases. That technical, creative and economic combination and the means to be able to start to develop an individual profile online is a lot to do with where we think self-agency can help for the future.
Brilliant. So technology does actually give people permission to be themselves and encourages self-agency. And I think indeed it's that positive slant on technology that we should take, rather than some of the fear mongering we're starting to hear. How can people sort of start thinking about this? So, I don't know how many people have actually thought about their own self-agency. How can people start crafting the fabric of these human networks and, build their own self-agency?
There's a huge amount that I've seen come out of people in terms of next level development, whether it's professional, personal, when they can think, right, this is what I'm about. Just even spending time with that question, starting to map that and see, well, where are my strengths? Where do I gravitate towards? And the reason I think that's important is that attention is a currency. Anyone who's surfed online for more than a few minutes knows that attention kind of wanders where it wants to, and yet there will be a purposefulness behind that. And if that's where our energy naturally goes, and we can start to think, well, what is it that drives me? What's the particular lens that I bring? That's usually a good starting point. That's the cue that I like to work with when working with people, because everyone I believe absolutely has a huge amount that they can bring in and of their own right to a situation that they understand well and are engaged with. But to be able to begin that process means really sitting with that question: how can I develop the interests and the aptitudes that I have? And who do I do that with? Who do I network with? How can I begin to frame that to solve problems that people need solving? Those three questions, I think, take people on quite a useful, viable path, both for themselves and the people around them.
Yeah, I think it's important to describe that context of attention being huge currency, attention and time are huge currencies, and if people can look at it through their lens, I think it's great to hear that from you, Anne, and then hopefully that matches with what the organisation's trying to achieve. And then if it doesn't, then I think people have permission today. We shouldn't have to give them permission, but in some organisations we do. But they should be speaking up, either using the technology or not. But once they're more comfortable about their own being and their own self, they can start challenging as well where the organisation goes. And I think motivation and enjoying getting out of bed at night comes when there's a joint purpose between what you think's right for you and where the organisation is going. So we're looking at good times despite everything we're reading in the headlines.
I think so. And look at something like GitHub. That to me is a really good pointer, a marker for where organizational design and development might go in the future. I mean, for people that are technically inclined, they'll know GitHub, they'll be part of that whole thing. For those that aren't, I mean, GitHub is a fantastic repository of code that people will post and put up that can be copied, can be utilized, that people can start to build on for themselves. The amount of commits in terms of the posting and the development of code and the amount of times that people use the code really show a very dynamic relationship with in terms of what people produce and what people can develop as a collaborative compound exercise. So when we think about that, when we think about coding, and it's possible to paste code, use code, understand where the traction is, we get into a really interesting space. But that space only really starts to kick in when people are proactively playing their part in it and developing what they can in their own way, and seeing how that goes and responding and developing accordingly.
Yeah, and I think, well, I don't know GitHub, but I'm going to run away and find out what it's about. But it sounds as if that's a great return on investment on what people are all about and what people do and the impact they have. And I think in HR we're desperately looking for more measures to show the value of people. So that sounds as if that's a great measure to have. We're breaking down walls as well. So that sounds great. How do you see that future? I mean, your future is already you're already ahead in terms of your thinking. But if I was to push you out, 5 years ahead, where would you think all of this human network inside out is going?
I think we're going to get much more of a natural, technically developed synthesis between demand and supply, where problems are or who can solve them, fits between organizations as partners, as a networked ecosystem, understanding where things can become and made much more lean, where costs can be saved, where duplication of effort can be eliminated. What we get when we marry technical intelligence with human skills and capabilities is just an altogether more heightened platform for performance, intelligence, and value, I think. So I would like to see organizations, and this is the work that I do, reframe what they can do and how they can work in the future, holding on to that core sense of, well, what are we about, what are we here to do, and how can we frame that for this future synthesis between technology and the skills of our people. Where do we want to take that? How can we combine that to best effect? Because it will get more and more efficient. I mean, inevitably, I think.
Yeah, and it sounds as if it will be more fun as well. We're starting to understand the power of nature and walking through the woods. Sounds as if those that nature can also be an integral part of the way we build and frame organizations as well. I love the word synthesis. I love the way you make it so human. So there's hopefully less fear in the world when people look through the lens that you're sharing with us. So Anne, I know we could
back
go on
at you, Karen.
Sorry?
I was just going to say back at you, because I think integral is a great word. Integrity of organization is about an integral fit between the parts that make it up, so the components. So I would totally agree with that. Yes,
and integrity are part of the values that business have to start off with right at the beginning, and they become the guideline of how and why they do things. And you know how passionate I am about that one. So, but we're not going to go there. We're going to talk perhaps a bit about, I'm sure this has inspired a lot of people as I've been inspired in our various conversations. Where would you suggest people go to follow up on some of these topics, to learn a bit more? And then how should people start sort of bringing this to their organisation, their boss? Sort of where to go?
Okay, well, a couple of points that I would suggest, just because I think they really add so much to the conversation. If anyone has heard of Sandy Pentland at MIT, I would definitely suggest checking out his work. He wrote a book called Social Physics a few years back, which really shines a very powerful and informed light on this subject. Also from the tech end, Nick Bostrom, head of artificial intelligence at Oxford, wrote a book called Superintelligences a few years ago. There are great people in Google who are looking at AI too. I would definitely go there as a point of reference. Evonomics is a great resource. If anyone's heard of Evonomics, it's an online kind of a magazine cultural resource looking at the new economics and these sort of human issues. I think for next generation thinking, leapfrog, what I might call leapfrog thinking, There's a guy called John Robb with two B's who writes a blog called Global Guerrillas. His background is on military intelligence in the US, but he's very well clued up in terms of how artificial intelligence, bots, the whole geopolitical situation is going to change our basic assumptions and how to be ready for those. So I think about all of those things, and also just to connect with places that can give, if you like, permission for leapfrog thinking, not just innovation. I think it's about transcending the basic assumptions we have a lot of the time, and to do so in confidence. And if anyone is interested in looking at the self.agency, that's the website for the initiative, the project that you mentioned that I'm doing with Simon Goff. Yeah. We've got some principles of self-agency on there, and they sum up some of the basic, I think, the basic preconditions which help all this stuff happen.
Yeah, and I think if we have either leaders or some people on the line, then even start with the self-agency piece, and be comfortable in the fact that if it doesn't feel right, if you think we could be doing more with our people assets, then it does start with you, and it starts with sharing what you believe in. We're definitely going towards a world that needs to be far more agile, and I think that's the role people directors can play, or people managers can play today, is helping the business be far more agile and look back at the inherent purpose. So I think that's how we started talking. As well, Anne, looking back at purpose. So purpose is a word that has been sort of pushed around quite a bit. So maybe at the last point we can unpeel just a little bit what we actually mean about this, true purpose.
Yes. Well, there's a set of values, there's a mission that powers everybody and all organisations, however they express it. When you peel back the layers. So why? What is it when you say purpose beyond profit? If money didn't matter, what is it that this organization is inherently there to do? Or what is it that is the thing that one would want to spend one's time doing beyond all else? And the purpose very often comes from the values that sit behind that. So what matters? What do we want to make matter? And to get to an almost unequivocal truth, which if you took that thing away, it wouldn't be what you want to do, it wouldn't be what you want to be known for. Just starting to design well, if you like, around those basic core attributes and the essence of what an organisation, however complex, what a lifetime's work, however rich and varied, what are the underlying threads? When I look back at the history of design, it's all about taking stuff out. Really great design is being able to boil things down to their most simplest forms. Yeah. So to get to that and to think how that then starts to flourish in this environment where the business modeling has changed, where we can do so much in terms of rich technology, rich connectivity, when we can understand experiences through data, when we can build reputational value and an impact value through our networks. That all turns, and it turns well when we can start to get to that kernel of what it is that we really want to be known for and associated with. So that for me is what purpose boils down to, is getting to that and going, yes, unequivocally, yes, that's in the zone. That's what we can make our own.
Yes, and inevitably we'll get to true human insights, but in a way that's not a tag on. We've talked a lot about greenwashing in brand context, but I think in an organizational context as well, I think we're at risk of just tagging on initiatives, whereas if you keep asking that why question, you get to something that's far more powerful. And driving the bottom line or growing a business, that's a great objective to have, but it's got to be an and. There must be something bigger that a leader or a founder, and we're seeing that more and more in the mission-led networks that are building today, aren't we?
Absolutely. And here's the thing for me, is that the new ingredient piece is interactivity. So I think it's quite difficult to say, oh yes, I'll do that. Well, it all sounds great. I'll do that in the existing circumstances that I've always been used to. I think it really does help to have mentors, to be able to bounce stuff off. And it also really helps to have feedback and discussions, open discourse with both colleagues as part of an extended network and also customers, users. That is really kind of what I'm interested in, is putting the skill and the capability into a space that allows that to happen, because it's not really been there before. It's not something that one can just dive into or just pick off the shelf. There is a deeper interactive development process that technology can help us have, and just embracing that and really utilizing that is really what we're talking about. Well, I'm talking about, certainly.
And in synthesis, as you said earlier, I love that word of technology to get better feedback, but also those one-to-one mentoring moments, I think are powerful. So as we imagine, the time has gone without us. We said it was an important currency earlier. So we're going to stop here, but it's been great talking to you. Thanks for those listening in, and hopefully there'll be also people listening to the different clips. There's lots of brilliant nuggets to help leaders be great leaders. So look forward to seeing you in those clips and seeing you again soon, Anne. So thank you very much.